1,000 years ago, West Africa saw the Ghana Empire rise to power and riches off the trans-Saharan trade. Today, its name lives on in the Republic of Ghana, except the Ghana Empire's territory never actually overlapped with the borders of modern Ghana. Zoom out and you'll notice a bunch of place names all across Africa that seem to have moved over the centuries. The Kingdom of Benin was not located in Benin. The French once controlled a colony called French Sudan, nowhere near modern Sudan, and even the term Africa once referred to a Roman province. So why exactly did these place names move, often by thousands of kilometers? Where did these place names even come from? And what does this tell us about the history of Africa? Let's start with the area I mentioned in the beginning, Ghana, which is either here or here depending on when you look. If we're talking about the Middle Ages, then Ghana would refer to the Ghana Empire, who were the first of the major empires to grow rich off the trans-Saharan trade networks, later followed by the Mali and the Songhai empires. The ruling population were a people known as the Soninke, who are still around today, just to be clear, and in their language, the state was known as Ouagadougou. The rulers of this land, meanwhile, were known as Kaya Magan, or Lords of Gold, which is thought to have led to the name the Arab world would give this land, Ghana. The Ghana Empire came and went, followed by the previously mentioned Mali and Songhai, and then came the British and the French, who carved up the area to look like this. Throughout the colonial era, different parts of the West African coast were named after resources found in the area. You got the Grain Coast, you got the Slave Coast, you've still got the Ivory Coast, or Côte d'Ivoire, and you also had the previous name for this area, the Gold Coast. However, that name wasn't going to work for an independent country. Well, I guess Côte d'Ivoire made it work, but that's a different story. One important thing about Ghana at this time is that it was the first country in West Africa to break away from European rule, with early leaders like Kwame Nkrumah eager to shape the political future of the region. Thus, the name Ghana was chosen pretty much for the prestige of carrying on the name of a pre-colonial power, even if it's kind of like Russia calling themselves the Third Rome. Full disclosure, by the way, this video is basically just this infographic I found on Reddit a while back, just with a bit more information about each name. Benin follows a similar pattern, where the modern country is over here, while the Kingdom of Benin was over here in southern Nigeria, which is why Benin City is located seemingly nowhere near Benin. However, you might recall that the country used to be called Dahomey, after the Kingdom of Dahomey, a fawn kingdom whose borders fit almost perfectly into the southern third of the modern country. This changed with the Marxist-Leninist coup in 1975, when the Republic of Dahomey became the People's Republic of Benin, later becoming just the Republic of Benin, picking a name that was thought to be more inclusive of the whole country, not just one part in the south. And not after the Kingdom of Benin, but after the Bight of Benin, which was named after the Kingdom of Benin. Much of the Ghana Empire's territory was actually in what is today Mauritania, but to a Roman observer, Mauritania was actually on the Mediterranean coast, not hundreds of kilometers deep into the Sahara. In fact, the name Mauritania, or Mauritania, they're the same word, would eventually give us the word Moor, originally referring to the Maori, a Berber group not to be confused with the Maori of New Zealand. Maori came into Latin from the Greek Mauros, which might have a different origin, but most likely comes from the Greek word for black. About 1,000 years after this place stopped being called Mauritania, with France expanding their authority across West Africa, a colonial administrator named Xavier Copelani submitted a proposal to expand French control up into the Sahara. Reportedly out of his love for and interest in Arab culture, Copelani called for the creation of a new colony stretching from the Senegal River to the borders of Morocco and east into what is now southern Algeria, naming it Mauritanie Occidentale, with this Mauritania gradually being used more and more until the name stuck, even if Copelani's wish for a peaceful colonization didn't exactly pan out. Next to Mauritania is Sudan. Kind of. Sudan gets its name from the Arabic term Bilad as-Sudan, which is basically the same thing as Mauritania. However, the Sudan originally referred not to this part of East Africa, but more broadly to the Sahel, that narrow band between the Sahara and the grasslands to the south, and which includes the former colony of French Sudan, nowadays called Mali. But wasn't this place called Nubia for thousands of years? Well, not really. Technically, Nubia refers specifically to the banks of the Nile between Khartoum and Aswan, which, yes, puts historic Nubia partially in modern Egypt. But this entire area, administered by the British, also includes areas like Darfur in the west, who, along with Nubia and the south, which broke away in 2011, each have very different cultures from the region's predominant Arab culture. Tensions between these regions are of course part of what has led to a series of devastating conflicts, including the ongoing Sudanese civil war. Turns out not even the name Africa is immune to this, as the term was originally used for this area around Tunisia. It was the Romans who called the peoples of this land Afri, but no one knows for sure where that word came from, whether it was from the Phoenician word Afar for dust, sharing the same stem as the Arabic word Ifrit, or maybe a Berber word meaning cave, Ifri, or the Latin word abricus meaning sunny, or maybe even the ancient Greek term abrike, meaning without cold, or technically without shivering. Either way, it was good enough for the Romans to use for this particular area once they had conquered Carthage from Carthage, naming the new province Africa Proconsularis. As the dominant language of this area went from Phoenician to Latin to Arabic, the Latin name Africa became the Arabic name Ifriqiya, going from a specific province with defined borders to just this general area. The thing is, though, it's not that Africa referred only to this part of North Africa, it could also have been used more generally. You can see this in the so-called T&O maps of the Middle Ages. A good example is this map from the Etymology, compiled by Isidore of Seville in around 625, which shows the three known continents in a sort of idealized way. Obviously not meant to be used for navigation, but a great way of visualizing how people saw the world in those days. It was of course the Portuguese 900 years later who would circumnavigate the coastlines of this continent, confirming that you actually could sail around it without hitting land, or boiling alive in the torrid zone, with maps like these proudly proclaiming to show all of Africa. If you wanted to talk about the entire continents back in the days of ancient Rome, you might have had better luck with the term Libya, which has kind of gone in the opposite direction from Africa. Depending on who you asked, Libya would have usually referred to basically all of Africa, or at least all the Mediterranean world knew of Africa, everywhere west of the Nile, which for a time was seen as the dividing line between Africa and what would eventually be called Asia. Interestingly, just as a bonus, the area of North Africa west of Egypt is known as the Maghreb, from the Arabic word for sunset, hence the Maghreb prayer, and is also the name of this country at the westernmost point of the region, which, after being filtered through multiple different languages, is known to English speakers as Morocco. The name Libya comes from the ancient Libu tribe from ancient Egyptian records, so in a sense it's always had a connotation of west of Egypt, whatever we decide that means. In the 3rd century AD, Libya was used as the name of two new provinces created by Emperor Diocletian, splitting Cyrenaica from Crete and creating Libya Superior and Inferior, which just meant big and little, it's not a tier list thing. When talking about the whole entire landmass, both Africa and Libya were sometimes used interchangeably, though more often you would have seen Latin speakers using Africa and Greek speakers using Libya. The use of Libya even continued well after the fall of Rome, but over the centuries Africa was used more and more until it became convention, even in the Greek-speaking world. Libya would be brought back as a name in the early 20th century, becoming official in 1934, with Italy merging their colonies of Tripolitania and Cyrenaica and taking over Fezzan in the southwest. Lastly, Ethiopia is similar to Libya in that the name didn't really move, but shrank. If Libya traditionally referred to the lands west of Egypt, Ethiopia was the name used for lands far south of Egypt. There have been a lot of explanations put forth for where this word came from a word for incense, Itan, to the legendary king Ethiopis. A more common explanation, though, is that it came from the Greek Aitiops, meaning burnt face. Either way, the word is way old, having been used in the area since the Middle Ages after centuries of contact with the Mediterranean world, and in particular, the area's increasing Christianization. In ancient times, the name was often used for places like Nubia, But by the 1300s, the new Ethiopian Empire began using the name for itself. At least that was the case in languages like Ge'ez, while in Arabic the term was Al-Habasha, which is partially why in the 19th and 20th centuries, another name for Ethiopia was Abyssinia. Throughout the 20th century, though, this would eventually be changed so that everyone knew this place as Ethiopia. Unless you live in Malaysia, I guess. Throughout this video, you might have noticed a particular theme, which is that this isn't exactly a history of Africa, but a history of how the European and Arab worlds viewed Africa. There are lots of place names in Africa that come from actual African languages. In fact, most African countries do, be it Congo or Namibia or Somalia, but obviously I wasn't going to talk about them here as they had a distinctly slower average velocity.